You may have seen those insane videos of people applying a kajillion buffs to their character before entering the boss room and completely Thanos snapping them out of existence.
Impressive.
You may have even attempted to recreate this amazing feat of strength yourself, only for the results to be, well, not optimal. It may not be the case, but this probably has something to do with the convoluted way in which buffing works in Elden Ring.
What the frick?
Buffing is a mechanic in the hit video game of the year Elden Ring, where you can temporarily increase your stats through the use of either items, spells, or incantations, not to confuse them with buffs obtained through talismans or equipment. Most common buffs include the ones that buff either your overall damage or your overall defenses, such as Exalted Flesh, or everyone's favourite, Boiled Crab. The buffs typically have a short duration, ranging from 30 seconds in the aforementioned goodies, or up to 3 minutes when using certain crystal tears in the Flask of Wondrous Physic, and most of them are used before the fights begin due to slow startup.
This is fucking dog shit!
But is there any logic to the buffs they use, or is it just random? Well, there is a logic, actually. You can't just take every buff in the game and hope to stack them together to become a super mighty galaxy destroyer, because that's not how buffing works in this game. You need to know which ones can stack with each other. There are 5 categories of buffs in Elden Ring: weapon buffs, body buffs, aura buffs, region buffs, and special buffs. You can refer to this chart to know what spells Ashes of War or what the fuck ever else is in each category. And this is important because the gist of the matter is that if you wish to stack buffs, you can only stack one and only one buff per category. To give you a brief example, if you use Barrier of Gold to increase your magic defense, and then you use Exalted Flesh to increase your physical damage, the Exalted Flesh will end up overriding the Barrier of Gold because they're both body buffs.
Why does all of this seem familiar?
The only exception to this rule are the special buffs, as you can stack as many of them as you want without having them override each other. The concept is very simple, with the hard part being remembering what type of buff is the next one you're going to apply. This can be a bit tricky because the game doesn't really clarify or explain you what is what. You do have a little visual cue under your health bar that indicates the type of buff you just applied, but unless you're familiar with it, they'll just be random symbols to you. An interesting example of this is the Ash of War, called Braggart's Roar. When used, it will provide a damage bonus, a defense bonus, and a stamina regen bonus. Now, can you guess which of the 5 types includes this buff? And you're not gonna fool me. I know you just rewinded the video to look at the chart so you don't have to guess, but you didn't find it, didn't you? Braggart's Roar is a weapon buff, meaning that if you remove the weapon from your hand, the buffs will be gone. But here's the funny thing, only the defense and stamina regen part of the buff can be stacked. The damage portion is only applied to the weapon. Pretty freaky, huh? And I know what you're thinking. The chart is a bit outdated, as it was made way before the DLC blessed us with its footsie presence, and even some buffs from the base game are missing, but it's generally good to have it around when planning your builds. However, this rule does not apply when talking about passive buffs from talismans or equipment. Best example of this being the 3 poison-triggered buffs from the Mushroom Crown, the Kindred of Rot, Exaltation, and the Poisoned Hand, as you can trigger all of them at the same time, resulting in a huge damage increase. So even though they're all basically the same thing, they could be considered special buffs. So feel free to stack as many passives as you can. Now that I assume you understand how buffing works, why don't we analyze one of these crazy one-shot videos? But before getting into that, you need to know that no matter how many defensive buffs you stack, it won't protect your online private information. That's why you need a virtual private network, which creates a point-to-point tunnel that encrypts your personal data, masks your IP address, and lets you sidestep website blocks and firewalls on the internet by establishing a digital connection between your computer and a remote server owned by a VPN provider. Just like private internet access. With over 30 million downloads and great Trustpilot reviews, private internet access takes care of those pesky great sword of damnation mains and ensures smooth, non-dial-up gameplay. Not only by lowering your ping and bypassing ISP throttling, it also encrypts your internet connection data and secures it through a private channel where no up-to-no-good goobers can take a peek into.
Not nice.
Private internet access no logs policy also ensures that your data will not be recorded nor stored. Private internet access makes it its job to ensure your IP remains as hidden as those sussy homework folders in your hard drive. You can even catch up on your favorite shows that are unavailable in your country's favorite streaming service by simply logging into a different country's connection. I mean, with 50 servers in 50 different US states, the possibilities are bound to be endless. It's also available for Windows, Mac, Linux, Android, iOS, and you can protect all of them at the same time with only one private internet access subscription. Click our link in the description to get an exclusive 83% discount, plus 4 very long month-a-roos for free.
Can I go now?
And don't worry, their 30-day money-back guarantee and 24/7 customer support make this decision risk-free. Thanks to Private Internet Access for sponsoring this video. In here, we have one of those videos, particularly from the channel... Well, we can see our guy wearing the black dumpling helmet while dropping a frenzy stone on the floor. This is because the black dumpling gives a 10% damage boost when madness is procced in the vicinity. Next, he uses seppuku to lower his health, followed by 2 special buffs, his flask of wondrous physic and the blood-boiling aromatic for a 30% damage increase. Next, he uses the Commander's Standards Ash of War, which gives a 20% damage or a buff to all sources, interrupting the animation with madness, proccing the black dumpling's passive bonus. He then enters the arena and switches to the Mushroom Crown in order to poison himself and receive the boost from both the Crown and Kindred of Rot's Exaltation. He switches both those items for the White Mask and the Lord of Blood's Exaltation to get the passive bleed boosts after proccing seppuku on himself. The Red Feathered Branch Sword activates when he's low on health, boosting his damage by 20%. He uses Royal Knight's Resolve to boost his Giant Crusher damage by 80%, a weapon buff, and the Jellyfish Shield's Ash of War for even more damage, a special buff. And for the final smash... Of course, this is a completely exaggerated amount of buffs that can only be used in PvE, as in an actual PvP fight, people won't just simply stand there while you buff, and this is something that some gamers seem to really dislike.
Whenever I come across someone who refuses to even let me buff and attacks immediately, I just assume they don't know what fun means, and try to not give them any satisfaction in winning. Since getting that victory on their screens is all that matters for them.
I'm sorry, but this is merely an arbitrary rule, which is up to the player to abide by. In our opinion, after the initial emoting, you're already throwing hands, bro. So if you get caught slipping, that's on you. You can't really expect everyone to follow your imaginary rules, so you won't feel bad about not being able to use your wholesome Chungus 500 buffs build. However, if buffs with big startups cannot be applied mid-fight due to being unsafe, what can be? Well, there are quite a few buffs specifically designed to be applied in battle. Weapon buffs like Barbaric Roar or Drawstring Greases can be applied very swiftly during any fight, with the latter being applicable while running. And now that we mention greases, which are elemental buffs, I'd like to mention one of the most important aspects of buffing. And for that, we'll take, for example, the Carrion Thrusting Shield. This weapon has innate magic damage even when given non-elemental affinities, which means that it can still be buffed and retain its elemental damage. The best buff in this case would be something that further enhances said elemental damage. When comparing the damages with the rest of elemental greases, it is obvious that doing this gives optimal results. The same thing can be said about Ashes of War. If you're going to use Flaming Strike, the buff part of the Ash of War will provide bigger benefits on weapons that are already given the fire or flame art affinities. This is especially important in low-level PvP, where weapons shine for their base damages instead of their scaling properties. Not to mention that you also need to be careful because buffs do not provide the same benefits in PvP as they do in PvE, with the most prominent example being the Commander Standard's Ash of War.
This is
Not very useful.
In conclusion, while they may be fun to do from time to time, super buff-oriented builds are not recommended because if the initial setup fails to provide results before the buffs expire, then you're in a bit of trouble, my dude.
Wait.